Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome back to AI and the Future of Work. Thanks again for making this one of the most downloaded podcasts about the future of work. If you enjoy what we do, please like, comment, and share in your favorite podcast app, and we'll keep sharing great conversations like the one we have for today. I'm your host, Dan Turchin, CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. I'm also an investor in and advisor to more than 30 AI-first startups and a firm believer in the power of technology to make humans better. If you're passionate about changing the world with AI, or maybe looking for your next adventure, let's talk. Now, each week we learn from AI thought leaders. And of course, the added bonus is you get one AI fun fact each week. Today's fun fact, we tend to focus on how AI is augmenting humans on this podcast, but it's important to remember that globally, not everyone agrees with us. In fact, a recent survey of 327 AI researchers revealed that about a third believe AI could cause a catastrophe worse than nuclear war by the end of the century. Many of the concerned researchers indicated their fear of large language models, or LLMs, based on recent headlines like the one we discussed, whether or not Google's Lambda is sentient. Despite having discussed these themes previously, it is interesting to note that there is a wide divergence of opinions. I'll leave it to you to form an opinion about if and how AI is dangerous and if and how it should be regulated. As always, we'll link to the full article in the show notes. But shifting to this week's conversation, making data-driven decisions isn't just for analysts or tech teams. Gone are the days when data can be siloed in individual systems of record, as we've learned from great leaders like Derek Stier from Mode and Peter Fishman from Mozart Data, Bar Moses from Monte Carlo. Everyone can now be a data analyst, and every line of business can now benefit from AI-based predictions and recommendations, even sales and marketing teams. Leaders like Stephen Messer, who recently joined us from Collective Eye, Akmal Alwalia, who joined us from Eightfold, and today's guest, are pioneering a new approach where everyone in every org can access and work with data without a data science degree. Mona Akmal migrated to the United States at age 20 with a computer science degree and a little else. She had an impressive 12-year run as a product leader at Microsoft, where she helped scale OneDrive and Office. She subsequently led product and technology organizations at places like Code.org and Amperity. 2 decades later, Mona is the CEO of Falkon, an intelligence platform for go-to-market teams. Falkon recently raised $16 million from a group of A-list investors that includes Greylock and Madeira, among others. Mona is changing the world again. And today we get a peek into the mind of one of the best product leaders in AI in high tech. And without further ado, Mona, it's really my pleasure to welcome you to the podcast. Let's start by maybe having you share a little bit more about your background and how you got into the space.
Thank you so much, Dan. It's great to be here. And I don't know if I can live up to that very generous introduction, but I'll try. I, like you said, started as an engineer, realized that I was never going to be the best engineer on the planet because I like talking to people too much, and ended up moving into product management. And, for me, the 3 key words that define my life and my personal ethos, which is also why I started Falkon, are efficiency and excellence, and decoding what excellence means through data. Because I believe excellence is not something you're born with, it's something you can learn. And I am definitely an evidence of that myself and my whole life. And that's what we're trying to do at Falkon, is decoding what makes a sales rep that is a standout sales rep great, and being able to take that science and apply it to every sales rep. Same thing for marketing, same thing for sales development. And that's where I think data has a huge role to play, and excited to share more about that with you today.
I read some of the case studies on your website. Maybe it would help the audience for us to have you share a success story that you're particularly proud of.
one of the success stories that I'm really excited about is our customer Redis. And it was exciting for me for two reasons. One, as a very engineering heavy company, we are big lovers of Redis as a product. It's an open source database and also has a paid offering. And their head of growth, it was a 2-meeting close for us, which was a first for us as a company, because the problem resonated so much. And the problem was simple, which is sales teams and marketing teams have to work hard with companies that have massive free customer base, right? To identify which of those customers can be upsold and cross-sold and turn into paying customers, because at the end of the day, Redis is a for-profit company and they have to generate revenue. So when you have hundreds of thousands, millions of free customers, how do you prioritize which small subset of them are actually going to are getting enough value out of the product that they're willing to pay for your services? Because ultimately, Redis will only succeed or fail if they're able to turn some of this user growth into revenue growth. We were able to, it was a competitive situation. We were in a bake-off with a couple of other companies. I was so proud that we won the bake-off and we were able to help them prioritize the right customers to go after, the right messaging to pursue them with, and generate revenue for the business. And to me, helping businesses grow in such a tactical way, like a very measurable, quantifiable way, is really powerful. So I'm very proud of that.
AI for sales and marketing is a space that has really ballooned in the past, call it 18 to 24 months, everything from sales intelligence to monitor rep conversations, coaching, feedback loops. Sales intelligence at Falkon, what does it mean? And what would you say is the hard problem that Falkon has uniquely solved?
Yeah, great question. So, stepping back for a second, there has been a lot of innovation in the go-to-market space, as you mentioned. And it has, because all of this innovation is venture-backed, right? Venture capital needs companies to blow up in 10 years because that's their economic cycle, which is why they really push founders to focus on one small use case and get that right, get to product market fit, and then scale the shit out of it, right? Unfortunately, what that's done is it's created talk to a RevOps leader. They are managing 1,700 different solutions for one go-to-market stack. And it creates so many silos, right? I'm going to use Clary for forecasting. I'm going to use Atrium for my sales development productivity. I might be using People AI for sales productivity. I'm going to use Gong for conversational intelligence, and so on and so forth. It creates so many silos that you cannot optimize the entire go-to-market equation until you join all the data from these 17,000 tools that you're using and get perfect visibility into what's actually working and what's not working. So to us, the biggest innovation with Falkon is we are not a point solution. We have the contrarian view. We don't want to, I would much rather not get the product market fit for another year and do this right, and really focus on joining all go-to-market data into one data platform, and then turn that into use cases like forecasting, rep productivity, marketing performance, optimizing return on ad spend, and so on and so forth. Because the hard problem to solve is actually the data problem. And that's really the big innovation with Falkon. We consolidate and unify data across your very fractured go-to-market stack, and then offer automated insights, because that data by itself is so vast and so comprehensive that sifting through all of it to figure out what's the operational insight you need to act on today, it's a very cumbersome process, which most companies cannot afford to do manually by hiring an army of analysts.
So I love something that you reference on the website. Make your best deal your typical deal. As a RevOps leader, of course, that resonates. Beautiful words, makes so much sense, lots of heads nodding, right? But also as a RevOps leader, I'm thinking about the data that gets into my CRM system and my marketing automation system and my customer support system. And I'm thinking about, what does it actually mean to pull all those kind of, disparate silos together and presumably have Falkon do some magic that gives me some insights into how to make every deal like my best deal. How does that actually work?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, this is where I think machine learning is such an interesting tool, because machine learning is not actually great at coming up with solutions that don't exist, right? It's not creative. It's basically about automating something that a human already knows and understands. And so the good news is all these different systems are capturing every single interaction that a person at a company that you are selling to is doing, whether that's a web visit, whether that's them opening an email you've sent them 7 times, even though they'll never respond, but they opened it 7 times, to they're using your product, to they're coming to your support website and asking a question. These are all touch points that are available in these systems, and actually joining them is not that hard. And this is where my past experience at Amperity comes in, which was all about stitching data together. The problem was much harder actually at Amperity, because in the consumer world, your data sources are infinite, right? The good news with go-to-market data is there has been so much tool consolidation. For instance, if we can understand Salesforce and HubSpot as a CRM, we've covered 90% of the CRM market, right? So we natively understand those schemas super, super well. Similarly, if we can understand Eloqua, Marketo, again, HubSpot, and Pardot, we have probably captured 90% of the marketing automation tools out there. So joining data when you can understand the schemas, because tool consolidation has happened and category leaders have emerged, becomes a much easier problem than joining any random data in the world, right? And being able to match on things like account names. So adobe.co.uk is the same company as adobe.com or Adobe, right? Being able to do heuristic matching lets us really combine all that data. And our premise is, you mentioned the standout deal or the standout rep versus making that the typical deal. It is based on the same thing that I mentioned, that excellence can be learned, which is, if you realize that 90% of deals that are closed won end up having an ideal touch frequency of 7 touches when they are in stage 1 of the opportunity. And the ideal mix of those touches is some combination of BDR outreach, AEs setting up a meeting, and marketing sending this very high value piece of content. Now you can start to replicate that in your future deals, right? So that's essentially how we make it happen.
So sales reps are notorious for, let's say, having poor hygiene when it comes to updating particularly a CRM system. And we talk a lot on the show about how all AI is really a data problem. And all data really comes down to being a data hygiene problem. How do you prevent false positives or false negatives when you know that you're dealing with dirty data?
Great question. So I think the answer is a couple of things. One, half the data in a CRM is actually not human generated, it's machine generated, right? So for instance, when you enrich an account to add information about the segment and so on and so forth, you're getting that from Zoom Info, you're not getting that from a sales rep. So that data generally tends to be clean. And if it's not clean or not present, the solution's very obvious, which is just go enrich the data through an API play. So easy. Second is, I firmly believe, and this is a common objection we hear, our sales reps are not logging their activities. That's the primary place where sales reps fuck up, right? And so what we've chosen to do is, we actually have a free listener in Gmail and Google Calendar, which is where people are doing their activities. And we heuristically figure out, oh, this sales rep sent an email to dan@adobe.co.uk, which is the same as this account in Salesforce called Adobe. So let's just log that activity for the rep so that they can spend more time selling and less time doing paperwork. And that's, to me, actually a very good use of AI. And to your question, you made the fun fact of the day. This is not about replacing a sales rep. It's about taking a part of their job away that they absolutely hate, right? And so partly we clean the data by collecting data where it is being generated instead of insisting that the rep log it manually. The third part of the data hygiene problem is you cannot fix what you cannot measure. If you imagine, if you knew that I was going to come over to your house and open your pantry and look through it, you are much more motivated to clean it than if no one's ever going to look into it, right? So with Falcon, it's actually one of the first benefits you see in the first 3 months is because we are shining a light on all the data, and the reps complain. They're like, well, this is wrong. Like, no, my account is actually healthy. Well, then go fucking fix the opportunity stage in it, right? So when you bring that kind of visibility, it actually helps people connect the benefit of doing paperwork where needed in order to get the insight that they need to go close this deal. All people are motivated by self-interest. So all you have to do is connect the data hygiene problem with something that actually benefits them hitting their quota, and they'll do it. And they do it. So I guess that's a long answer to your short question.
Good answer. So this is a hard one, but I got to get your take on it. So you said, let's say the data shows that my most successful customers, my biggest deals, at this stage in the sales process, they took 7 touches. And so AI or machine learning will dutifully go and probe the data, find the pattern and say, you need another 3 touches, because at this stage, you're under what's typical for a large deal. Well, as we all know, AI-based or machine learning-based predictions are prone to error, or what we call false positives, if the story that the data tells may not actually be optimal. The story of the data tells what's happening, which may or may not be the best possible scenario. Maybe it could be the case that only 5 touches would be more effective. Maybe it's 8, but it's just going to reiterate what the pattern in the data says. How do you know if the culprit may be the data and you may be generating predictions that are suboptimal?
Great question. So I think especially when you apply this to sales, it's 2 problems happen. One, you're often dealing with data sets that are too small for classic machine learning models. So we end up using a lot of econometrics techniques rather than classic big data ML models. And so we are actually looking for we have a little bit more conservativeness built into the data itself. So we'll never say it takes exactly 7 touches to close a deal, because that's just not the reality of how sales works, right? We'll say, hey, typically it takes between 5 to 9 touches, and you are at 0 touches, right? So you are like way the fuck out of what is considered good. So I think, one, you have to really come up with a user experience and apply machine learning to your problem in a context-specific way. This is not a precise science. This is a heuristic science with sales. That's one. Second is that you need the user experience to not be alarmist, right? This is meant to aid the human. This is not meant to control the human. It's not meant to direct the human. So we think of ourselves just from a visual standpoint, to not be alarmist, to be more like, hey, have you considered? Almost like a trusted advisor or a therapist, as opposed to a dictator and a micromanager. So I think user experience plays a lot into it. And then the third is ask people for feedback. Often they will tell you what the biggest problems are, and then incorporate that feedback into how loud or how aggressive or conservative you are in your recommendations.
It's kind of a wonky technology question, but every company building AI-based recommendations or predictions into a product faces the challenge of how much weight to give user feedback. For example, one recommendation where one, RevOps leader or user says it didn't help. I don't know if you want to go and, retrain the model based on that, but maybe if it's coming up, a dozen or 100 or 1,000 times a day, you say, well, there's clearly a pattern. How do you, at a product level, how do you think about what weight to give user feedback?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we actually don't have auto-tuning models, again, because we are in a space where we're dealing with small data sets for the sales part of the data. With marketing data sets and web visits, there's a lot more data, so you can do auto tuning. So with the user feedback on sales data, it really just goes into a log, which our data scientists evaluate, right? So that qualitative element has to be present to say, okay, we need to really think about the features of our model differently. So it's not an auto-tune model, it's a hand-tune model. And that's why we apply a qualitative filter or lens to it before anything is updated in the system.
We often talk about the potential of biased data seeping into models and ultimately resulting in poor or biased decisions. And I know that in this space, it seems like it's pretty innocuous. We're looking at deal histories and things like that, but just engage me in this thought experiment. What if the machine learning model says, I don't know if you use gender as a factor, maybe you do, or geography or zip code or something, but it says, open rates are far higher when you're marketing to this role. And this role tends to be a male-dominated role. So all of a sudden, feedback about who to market to says, target this gender, or, your biggest deals come from this zip code. And it happens to be, you and I were talking before the show, maybe, a very gentrified zip code or something. And so inadvertently, Falkon could be directing teams in the direction of strategies that may reveal some latent bias in the data. How do you think about your responsibility as a provider of an AI-first solution to manage the potential for bias seeping into the data?
Another great question. And I think that this is where, what I've seen in practice with our customers is, because our customers are high growth companies, often historical data is only one facet of what our models consider. So actually, again, these are not classic ML models. There are human overrides and so on, because often our customers are trying to go into new territories. They're trying to expand globally. There is no historical data that is telling us it's going to take 7 touches once you go to the UAE, for instance, right? And so goals and aspirations have a very big role to play, right? So our customers can actually input goals when there's lack of historical data, or as an override to historical data to offset the bias. And so that's sort of one way in which we counter that. The second thing, and we were actually having this conversation internally, to me, the forefront of this really, and we're just now getting into reviewing email text, for instance, right? We have stayed away from qualitative unstructured data so far. That's where a lot of bias kicks in, because the way you write an email, the way you present yourself on a phone call, and how you conduct yourself lends itself to being more biased towards certain ethnicities, certain genders, and so on. So far, we haven't processed that data, and we're still developing a point of view on how to handle exactly the problem that you've mentioned.
When you figure it out, can you come back on the podcast and teach everyone? It's a hard problem.
It is a hard problem. This is very true.
You and I, it sounds like, are in violent agreement that the third of AI researchers that say, AI may have catastrophic impact by the end of the century, probably a little bit of fear mongering. But let's just talk in practical terms. Fast forward a decade from now, and Falkon is ubiquitous, and presumably the role of sales and marketing leaders has changed. What are the tasks that remain that will just never be good candidates for AI-based predictions and recommendations?
Yeah, so I mean, that's actually one of the reasons why we have not gotten into conversational intelligence, because I continue to believe that the level of environmental information that exists in a conversation between two human beings, if 70% of it is nonverbal, how can a conversational intelligence tool possibly tell you what the right messaging is? Because 70% of the data is missing, right? And so that's why I'm not a huge believer in that. Yes, you should talk 30% of the time instead of 70% of the time. You don't need AI for that. But anyway, so I think that to me, the tasks that will remain, sales continues to be a human led thing. And I do not believe that that's going to go away. People, especially when you're buying something expensive and the cost of being wrong is high, as if you are a human, as long as a human is purchasing software, they will purchase from another human. If it's not like 20 bucks, right? Because they need to be reassured. They need to see a face. They need to know they're in good hands. And so to me, that job is absolutely not going away. What your brand voice looks like is not going to be determined by, in my opinion, machine learning or AI. Also, I think as humans, we will have a choice in the matter. It's not like AI is indiscriminately going to apply itself to all problems. Like, for instance, I'll give you an example. As a CEO, there are always about 90 hours of work I could do in a week, and I don't have 90 hours because I'm a person and I need to sleep and all that stuff, all that boring extraneous stuff. So I have to choose what aspects of my job I am going to delegate and give away and automate, and what parts of my job make me happy so that I can keep them. To me, that's actually the application of machine learning I'm excited about, is human beings are able to shed the nonsensical, garbage, mind-numbing, repetitive work that they already hate doing so that they can focus on things that require the five senses, the true environmental understanding that helps us be creative, that helps us build trust, that helps us reassure people, build relationships. That's the part that humans are great at, right? And that's the part that I think is going to remain. Whether we're able to automate an email being sent out or not, the email is still being written by a person, in my opinion.
Oh, no, I cringe at the thought of a future where bots sell software to bots.
I know.
I sure hope you're right.
God, I hope not. That's not going to happen.
Now, I in preparation for this conversation, read some of your blog posts, and you just reference, you're human, and the single theme that runs through a lot of your blog posts is just the humanness. They're raw, they're beautiful, you write beautifully. I referenced a sentence or two about your background. I'd love for you to share how your personal journey has influenced your philosophy and your leadership style.
Thank you. That's I appreciate that you read those blogs. I actually wrote them a long time ago, and I feel pretty vulnerable and exposed that they're still up there on the internet. Because they were written long before I started Falkon, but I've been told many times not to take them down as a way to preserve my own humanity. And so to me, one of the reasons for starting Falkon was I'm not someone that I struggle to form close relationships with people outside of shared struggle. And that's just like, my sister, my mom, and I have gone through a lot of shit together when I was very young. And that shared struggle has connected us in a way that is so special and so precious that in my life, I've tried to repeat that over and over again. My closest friends are people I've built something with, because you get to know people at such a profound and real level when you're all failing together. It's very dark. You don't know where to go. You have to lean on each other. You have to have good days and bad days, and, be a psycho some days and be ecstatic other days. To be able to do that with people is honestly the motivation for Falkon outside of the content of Falkon. It was to be able to build those deep, meaningful relationships with people that I love and respect. And that shows up in my leadership style. I'm a very anti-hierarchical person. I've recently been convinced to bring managers into Falkon. I don't believe in management. We're all adults. No one needs to be handled. Everyone needs to be coached, and no one needs to be managed, in my opinion. And that's how we run our business. We are 100% flat. everyone knows everyone. Everyone's involved in a decision that they care to make and have a believable point of view on. And it's all about being in the trenches, and it's all about leading from not behind or ahead, but from within the group.
We're about out of time, but I'm not letting you go without answering one last question. Being the CEO of a high growth company can often be a lonely role. It's a little ironic because all day long you're surrounded by people and you're in coaching sessions. And like you said, it's a flat organization. So it's a constant stream of activity. And yet, I think a lot of CEOs in our roles can sometimes get to the end of the day and feel you're always on stage. And it's hard to be your authentic self. What are some of the coping mechanisms or tools that you've used to avoid feeling isolated as a CEO?
Yeah, so I talk to my mom every day. My mom does not give a fuck what I do. CEO, schmeo, who cares? So, that's a really good way to stay grounded. I have rituals. So, must talk to mom every day, must see my nephew every Thursday, must spend Saturday mornings with my sister and my nephew, no matter what. I don't care if I'm fundraising, if the world is on fire. I have 3 cats, 2 dogs. I spend a stupid amount of time snuggling with them. And I have a therapist. I have 2 coaches. I row like a motherfucker. And I have my fitness coach who, kicks my ass in the gym a couple of times a week. That keeps me sane. I do not feel lonely. If anything, it's like, I have a lot of, and maybe that's sort of the benefit of starting a company when you're older. You've developed a lot of coping systems and support systems around you. So I feel very lucky.
Mona, I've asked that question probably 30 times over the years in this podcast. That is the single best answer I've ever heard. And
Oh,
I want every CEO who's been on this show and who's listening, replay the tape and listen to that one. That is really a remarkably articulate answer to a very difficult question.
thank you so much.
Well, Mona, it feels like we're just getting started. I would love it. Maybe you'll come back on and we'll unpack some of the themes that we didn't get to, if you would mind.
I would love that. This was such a fun conversation, Dan. You're
Okay.
awesome.
Well, we are all rooting for you and Falkon to succeed. Any place you'd like to point the audience to learn more about Falkon?
Yeah, just go to falcon.ai. It's Falcon with a K. We couldn't afford the C. Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap for this week on AI and the Future of Work. Again, that's Mona Akmal, CEO of Falkon. And of course, I'm your host, Dan Turchin, back next week with another fascinating guest.